today we're going to hear of just one of those many adventures with the investigators of the Loch Ness Monster. Come on up, Lee.
Yay!
Ross, folks, give him a hand. You're in. Hi, how's everybody doing?
Great.
Okay, everybody say hi.
Hi.
So, I am here to tell you about a very serious run-in I had with the law. Almost cost me my life. It's an overcast day in July 1974 in Scotland, in Urquhart Bay, Loch Ness. And I am diving with a diver from the North Sea Oil Rig on behalf of the Academy of Applied Science. We're looking for a place to set our underwater camera installation, and I am following a lifeline down into the water, scuba diving, hand over hand, following this lifeline down through the peat-stained depths of Loch Ness. And when I say peat-stained, there are particles in the water. There's no amount of light that's going to increase your visibility. You can roughly see to the end of your arm, and that's it. And you put flashlight down there, it's just going to reflect off of the particles, doesn't increase your visibility. I got to about 60 feet, and I lost the other diver. I couldn't find him anywhere. I got to about 70 feet, and I lost the lifeline. I couldn't find that anywhere. Exactly. It was time to get out of Dodge. It was time to surface. I happened to notice that my air bubbles are going that way. And when I say that way, trust me, this is a sight I will never forget in my life. The bubbles were going that way. I knew for a fact that that way was up. So, I literally don't know up from down. I don't know if you dive, but you're weightless when you dive. You should keep track of the time. Moments like this, I turn to faith. I put my faith in physics.
There you go. Amen.
Call me a sheeple, but I believe in the law. I abide by the laws of nature. And when I see those air bubbles going that way, I say, you guys know where you're going. And I went down. And there isn't a doubt in my mind that I was going down. And going further down and further down, but I was following those air bubbles, and almost cinemagraphically this effect took place where the world spun around, and suddenly I saw the light from the surface.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a story about how I got involved with a team of super geniuses affiliated with MIT that was searching for the Loch Ness Monster. And it's also a story about how I got involved with rebuilding Aleister Crowley's temple, a black magician, and how I inadvertently broke up Led Zeppelin.
Damn you!
Yeah, it's, Scotland is a very weird place. Blame me.
Yeah.
Roger Plant does. Robert Plant, I'm sorry. Scotland and the Highlands particularly, and especially we were in the Great Glen, all sorts of weird stuff was going on. There were tweener ghosts, there were phantom ships, there were mystery orbs that bounced around people's fireplaces, there were corpse lights that left a funeral and went to the location where people were buried. This was a very weird place from the land that invented the word weird. And to top it off, they put the E before the I, and there's no C there. It's weird. How did I get here? There is this team, the Academy of Applied Science, coming fresh off their flipper photo in '72, and they needed some schmuck who knew something about underwater photography, who knew how to scuba dive, to sit there for 4 months at a clip with their installation. I'll do that. I was only too happy to be that person. We felt we were on the verge of the greatest scientific discovery of the century. In '72, they had photographed what appeared to be a flipper on the morning of August 8th at about 1:42 in the morning. What a sonar graph indicated were two large animate objects in the order of 30-40 feet in length. And at exactly 1:42, the strobe went off and captured an image of a flipper. The flipper measured 8 feet by 4 feet, so it tells you the idea, gives you an idea of the size of the critter it was attached to. We were now putting together an installation of 4 16mm cameras set up in an array with a station on either side of lights that were automatically triggered when anything the size of a subway car came within 30 feet. The Academy of Applied Science were, when I say super geniuses, I mean it. There were scientists who were afraid to go anywhere near Loch Ness research just because they knew what it would do to their reputation. And these were people who were beyond caring about their reputation. There was Doc Edgerton, who invented strobe photography. There was Charlie Wyckoff, who invented the film and took all the early A-bomb tests. There was Bob Rhines, who was our leader. Bob had invented a component to high definition, that became high definition radar, a component for radar. And, you know, it was incredible to be able to see beyond the horizon. And in fact, Bob became a patent attorney pretty much to protect this one invention. This guy was an amazing guy. You know, everybody there, they were scientists, we were following the scientific method. People who investigate the unexplained often miss the reason that everybody is interested in the unexplained is because it's fun. And we were having a lot of fun. I remember once, you know, we had all our equipment ready to go, or, you know, a day before actually installing it, it begins to drizzle, and Bob says, "Oh my God, let's get everything out of the rain." And then he starts laughing because it was all underwater gear. And that was the kind of stuff we were doing, yeah. And we had our installation, we installed it. Yes?
Do you want the photos? When did you want those photos?
Oh, we'll throw them on at the end, yeah, if there's time. I got a lot of ground to cover. And the first thing that I did was take a pole with certain markings on it, black and white, and swim in front of the cameras, because I mentioned the flipper that measured 4 feet by 6 feet. And what I didn't mention was we didn't know how far that thing was away from the cameras. It was entirely possible that there was a newt sitting right on top of the camera, and that's what we were seeing. It was an incredible experience for me. I had come 3 days after a very well-known writer on the subject, a guy by the name of Ted Holliday, had brought up Donald Orman, the official exorcist of the Anglican Church, to exorcise Loch Ness. Oh. And I was staying at the home of Winifred Carey and her husband, Wing Commander Basil Carey. And anybody's read about the Loch Ness monster, you know, she's had more sightings than anybody. And in fact, Bob Rhines had a sighting the previous year from her home. Basil and Mrs. Carey were, it was really Mrs. Carey who would talk about this. After the exorcism, they were all sitting around her living room, and there were 3 thunderous claps, and they looked out the window and saw these black swirling clouds, and Mrs. Carey saw a beam of pure white light go from one of the clouds directly to it was actually Ted Holliday's forehead, and it was the Reverend Orman who suggested that they put water on each of their foreheads to protect them from the evil spirits. Exactly. So this is what I'm coming to. The day after I arrived, another guy about my age, a gentleman, kid by the name of Nick Witchell, who was there to write an update for Constance White's book called More Than a Legend. She had written the first book on the Loch Ness Monster. And Nick was skeptical. Nick said, "Come on, do you really believe this?" Nick then went on to write a lot about the Loch Ness Monster and never really took that tack publicly, although he later became essentially the Walter Cronkite of Great Britain. He was a news reporter and was actually the person who reported on the famine in Ethiopia and brought that to the world's attention, and distanced himself from everything that was being done at Loch Ness. But I was maintaining surface observation, waiting for something to break the surface. Anybody who said that they thought that they had a sighting really didn't interest me, because there were so many people who had seen something 60 feet long, had seen 2 humps morph into one, had seen this head and neck tooling through the water, neck about 20 feet in length. And they didn't think that they'd seen it. They were certain that they saw it. So in addition to our underwater installation, which by the way was triggering all the time, we were very, very excited. We were doing other things, like doing things that we hoped would attract the beast. For instance, play fish in distress sounds underwater, do flashing lights underwater, doing things that we were hoping might attract this thing. We had been given a brick by International Scents and Fragrances, International Flavors and Fragrances, I'm sorry. This was a company that made perfumes. What they had done was given us a brick which they had saturated with pheromones from about 200 land and marine animals, hoping this thing would attract the animal. And the joke that summer was that somebody would report seeing a 20-foot long head and neck tooling through the water, at which point we'd say that was no head and neck you saw. Neither of us saw anything.
I get it.
Thank you very much. Again, any moment we thought something might break the water, and it was a very, for years afterwards, I couldn't look at a body of water without hoping to see something break the surface. But that never happened, and it didn't happen at Loch Ness. It was also the summer that the Japanese expedition was there, and we were very, very happy to have anybody bring scientific interest to Loch Ness. Yes?
Were the researchers that were developing those teams looking for a monster, or were they looking for an unidentified animal?
Right. At that point, we were working under the assumption that it was a breeding species of unclassified animals. 3 had been seen at the same time. 3 had been seen in the center of the loch, and a party of 5 on one side were seeing the exact same thing as a party of 3 on the other side. It wasn't an instance where people were saying, oh, look there, and somebody said, I don't see anything. So there were lots of group sightings, there were lots of times. It was really an overflowing bucket of evidence that we were looking at that time. There were a number of photographs. There was the surgeon's photograph. Many of you have seen like this. There were, Lachlan Stewart had 3 humps. There was the McNabb photograph. An overflowing bucket of proof. And it was obvious to me that it was just going to lead to a major discovery any time now. However, over the years, that overflowing bucket seemed to have developed a leak because each of those pieces of evidence were debunked. And interestingly enough, some of those pieces of evidence, like the surgeon's photo, were analyzed by the RAF, and they were determined to be thoroughly legitimate. There was one, they had measured the weight in front of the thing, done all sorts of calculations, determined it to be absolutely real, authentic, no question about it. The surgeon's photo also came with an unknown surgeon who was too embarrassed to be associated with it, so got the thing developed and publicized anonymously. It was, years later, somebody on their deathbed confessed to hoaxing the whole thing. So people are great believers, including scientists, who can come up with all sorts of scientific rationale for something that turned out to be a hoax. The Japanese were I'm sorry, yes?
What was the first sighting?
First sighting was in 565. Saint Abdon then had come over from Iona and had seen this beast, and he said, I forget exactly what he said. It's been a while. Saint Columba, yes.
And yeah, like they had, it had picked up a manservant and shook him around and eaten him, I think, and then
that part I don't remember.
Yeah, well, anyways, he commanded it in the name of Jesus to let go.
And the interesting thing was that it submerged by going straight down. And curiously, all of the sightings had that same, the thing went straight down. And I could stand here and I could come up with a convincing argument why there is a Loch Ness monster, and I could come up with just as convincing an argument why there is no Loch Ness monster. For my money, I had met too many people who had seen the thing, and I knew them. And it's not like, again, they thought they saw it. They knew they saw it. One woman I knew, Sheila Menzie, who with her husband ran a local gas station, said when she was a kid, she watched the thing for 40 minutes, could describe the texture of its skin, could describe like hairs coming out of it, said that it looked like an elephant. There were the Jenkins, who had just moved to Loch Ness, and they were very unsophisticated, hadn't read any of the books, thought it was an interesting thing, until he was starting up his tractor, and they had a very close-up sighting and described the thing as having a horse-like head, these horn-like appendages, and oddly these red eyes and baleen-like structure for its mouth. Wow. And again, that was common by people who'd seen it very, very close up. I don't know what to do with that. I can tell you the Jenkins were thoroughly reliable, sober-minded people, but Scotland's a weird place. They were retirees from the Royal Association for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. They were seeing all sorts of cats around their property that they would chase, and they described them as phantom cats. They couldn't find them they saw them out of the corner of their eye, and then they were gone. What they didn't know was, and Mrs. Carey had this book called The Legends of the Loch, and exactly the place that they had lived was, a long time ago, a cult which tortured cats. would insert a skewer down the cat's mouth and come out its ass until the great demon cat came forth and do their bidding. So,
Trigger warning.
who knows what any of that is? The Japanese expedition was interesting when we found out, and they had high hopes. They were going to bring in a mini sub, never happened. They were planning to harpoon the thing, capture it, and put it in a cage. People had a problem with that. The chief sonar operator was a very popular cabaret singer in Tokyo. The oceanological engineer was a star of a Japanese soap. This was reality TV before any of us knew what reality TV was. So that was really, really peculiar. Did not know what to make of that. Again, it was a very strange place. There was a writer who had come over to write about the Japanese expedition for Playboy magazine. His name was Dan Greenberg, and Dan and I became friends, and I said, if you think this is weird, maybe we should check out what's going on the other side of the Loch. People would travel 60 miles out of their way to avoid driving by Boleskine House, which was the home of Aleister Crowley, who I'm sure many of you know. He was one of the faces on Sgt. Pepper. He was a black magician. He'd written extensively on the subject, known as the most evil man in the world. Locals were terrified of this place. When they found out that I was going over there, they were not happy. But Dan and I went over there, and we met a young acolyte of Crawley's, a disciple who had, Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin, had now purchased this place. Aleister Crowley was very popular with rock stars, and Eric had come from Samuel Weiser's bookstore in New York City, which is a very famous occult bookstore, and we talked, and Eric was saying, well, Crowley believed in the scientific method, and Eric believed all of this stuff, and the occult is all based on the Kabbalah. It's all Western mysticism is based on this Jewish mystical practice. Eric didn't know as much as how to pronounce a Hebrew letter. So Dan and I ended up giving this guy Hebrew lessons on the floor of Aleister Crowley's bedroom, and teaching him, things that our parents had no idea would ever happen when they sent us to Hebrew school. But, we'd say it's not Aleph, it's Aleph, and far out. Everything we said to Eric was, far out. And Eric said, is there anything that he could do for us now that we've taught him all this pronunciation? And Dan was the one who said, we would really love to see something that couldn't be explained by conventional scientific means. And Eric said, like what? Like seen a demon? And I chimed in, yeah, that would be interesting. And he said, yeah, sure, no problem. He could make that happen. And gave us a book called the Goetia, which is outlines 72 demons. Actually, he gave us one book and said, no, that's Aleister Crowley's personal copy. Let me give you another. Yeah. And it was like ordering Chinese takeout. There were demons there that could help you recover lost treasure. There were demons there that could help you speak better. There were demons that could make men fall in love with women, and women fall in love with men. And then there was Sitri. Sitri had the head of a leopard, the wings of a griffin, and not only could he make women fall in love with men, but you got to see them naked first. So, I'm a 20-year-old college student. Dan is writing for Playboy. This is a no-brainer. Yeah. So Eric promised that he could raise Sitri for us, and we could get to see a demon and naked chicks. And nothing could be more exciting for either of us. So we got involved with rebuilding the temple, building banners of the east and the west, flashing tablets, which were written in Enochian, which is an angelic language where, you know, it would take you 4 days to write a single letter. But we were in earnest with this, and Eric at every step would say far out. He would ask us if we felt exalted, and the answer is not so exalted so much as paint stain from doing all this painting of flashing tablets and stuff like that. And in the end, well, you know, the only magic we saw was Eric's disappearing act when Jimmy Page didn't want us to raise demons in the temple, and then finally consented to doing it in the bedroom, and then didn't want us to do it at all.
Oh man.
Yeah. Right. It was a shame. And years later, I found out I actually met a guy who had managed Led Zeppelin, and he sat in a limousine between Robert Plant and Jimmy Page as Robert Plant was just railing into him for meddling in the occult, and this was the reason that Led Zeppelin broke up. And the only meddling in the occult that Page had done was me and my buddy Dan.
Damn.
Yeah, right. So right, and the only naked chicks were seen by Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, not us. The experience, in hindsight, made me aware that the real magician were people like Doc Edgerton, who was able to stop a speeding bullet with a strobe light. Charlie Wyckoff, who had invented 8000 ASA film for us, would enable you to photograph a black cat in a coal mine. And Bob Rhines, whose component for high definition radar later became the sonogram, which would allow doctors to see inside a woman's womb. That was magic. Bubble, bubble, toil and trouble, a resistor here, a couple of capacitors there, and you're seeing the impossible. I was living in a place where the northern lights were so bright you could read by them, you could actually hear them, but my discovery was this friendship with Dan Greenberg, and I started dreaming of chrome and plexiglass and moved to New York City in order to write and investigate all this stuff further. Through Dan, I met people like Ed and Lorraine Warren, who I did a lot of work with. They sent me to Eddystone, Pennsylvania to investigate a bleeding statue. I was telling somebody, brought swabs that I had been given by Michael Baden, medical examiner from New York City, who was very cooperative. The priest just freaked me out too much. I couldn't even get the samples. He was just saying anybody who touches those things, the heads just spin around and start screaming. I'm sure many of you know the bleeding statues phenomenon is often caused by Serratia ascendens, which is bacteria that's reddish in color and appears to ooze blood, and it happens a lot on granite statues. These things happen to be made out of plaster of Paris. If you ask me, the priest was having an affair with the congregant who donated these statues, and he was planting the blood himself. I investigated Bigfoot sightings on a tip from Lorraine Warren in Tennessee, which I wrote about for High Times magazine, where I actually did experience something that to me was unexplainable. We got people, everybody from a priest to a plumber was having these sightings of this Bigfoot, and these were not sophisticated people. These people didn't even know what a Bigfoot was. And we had lights planted along a path where we were hoping to see something. One night we heard something just stomping down. It had to be like the size of a moose just from the stomping we heard. It got to the point where we should have seen something. And all I can tell you is there was a series of clicks from a height of about 11 feet that circled around to the right. It sounded like baseball cards slapping against the spokes of a wheel. No idea what it is. The next morning, I heard a sound from the brush in front of me, and it just got louder and louder, and then this weird kind of stereoscopic effect surrounded me, and I charged into the woods. I wanted to see it, and if I had the answer for only a few seconds, that was okay by me. But I charged into the woods, and there was nothing there. People want to associate this with some kind of interdimensionality. I shrug my shoulders. I can tell you that, looking for an unclassified species of animals, I understood that. There was the coelacanth. It wasn't discovered until 1938. We thought it died out 65 million years ago. There was a pongo, which was reports of a chimpanzee that everybody thought, or the mountain gorilla, I'm sorry, everybody thought was bull until the early part of the 19th century and discovered the mountain gorilla. I can tell you, and that seemed, logical. We were rebuilding the Temple of the Black Magician and trying to raise a demon from another dimension. Okay, that's cool. What was really perplexing was the Japanese expedition. And that to me was black magic. It was reality TV. And I didn't understand it then. I'm not sure I understand it now. How am I doing for time?
1 minute.
Okay. Reality TV it's another subject altogether. It does such a disservice to the unexplained. There's one guy I worked with who does the show Hunting Bigfoot, and he said, as soon as you get to the area where people are having sightings, you say to the guy, so the nearest McDonald's is, you go, oh, no, that would be, it's over there. And he said, now you've got your shot for when somebody says, where did you see Bigfoot?
Right.
So, if nothing else, although the situations are all contrived, reality TV is about authentic relationships. And I can tell you, I became lifelong friends with Dan Greenberg. He introduced me to people like Frank Perry, whose movie many of you saw last night. Introduced me to New York City. He had been married to Nora Ephron, so I knew that entire crowd. I had investigated Oliver. I don't know if anybody knows who Oliver was. This bipedal ape that people thought was, lack of a better word, missing link, although we know evolution didn't work that way. Turns out that there were apes that were trained to walk upright in Sumatra. Their arms were actually tied behind their back. So what I think I did discover was relationships. Like I said, I had my relationship with this guy my entire life until he got onset dementia and told me to fuck off. And I think, for all of us, it's the scariest thing in life, our relationships. I think it's the one thing that can't be explained by conventional scientific means. Do we have a moment to see some photos?
Let's do it.
Let's go. Let's whip through them real fast. I've got some things here. I took real low resolution.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, please.
Was the Loch of Ness ever mapped?
Yeah, not entirely. Well, actually it was, eventually. Loch Ness, okay. It consists mostly of two basins. Loch Ness itself is 22 miles long. Then it's connected to Loch 4, which is another 2 miles long. So it's roughly the size of Manhattan. It's 42 feet above sea level, so there are no underwater tunnels leading out to the sea. It is connected to the River Ness, which goes out to the Moray Firth. And you think, well, wouldn't the animals, if they were going in and out from the sea, be seen in the River Ness? Fact is, yes, and there were sightings where they have been seen in the River Ness. By the way, these animals have been seen in 78 lakes around the world, from Lake Furuta, Siberia, to Lake Okanagan, British Columbia. People seem to be seeing the exact same thing, or they're seeing nothing at all. I highly recommend a book called Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds, written by Charles Mackay, and it talks about times throughout human history where people just go fucking bananas. We've seen it here with the satanic panic of the early 80s. People just get notions into their heads. I will take questions. This is the cabin that I built with the observation deck looking out into the loch. Okay, this is the most perplexing thing of all this are the land sightings. There have probably been 15 land sightings where these things have been seen on land. This is Margaret Cameron and her sister, and as young girls, they saw this thing lope up the beach, and I mean, they were lying or they had seen something. There was no in between, and they weren't liars. They had come back to the area. They spoke in a way that was very, very believable. This is what Grant had seen, a young student, before people were carrying around cameras, and he saw this cross the road. This is what Spicer had seen. Same thing. This was by Foyers, which was, again, on the northern part of the loch. I should say, all of the, after Columba, all of the sightings started to really take off in the 30s when a new road was being built along the northern shore of the loch, and we don't know whether it was explosions or the increased traffic. Suddenly people were there to see things.
Coincidentally, like mere weeks after King Kong came out in 1933.
There were a ton of
The
sightings?
sightings picked up in
I wasn't aware of that.
after King Kong.
Okay, yeah. I was saying, though, there were two basins. The loch consists of like two large basins. And curiously, all of the sightings are the sightings which were seen out in the middle of the loch were at the edges of either of these basins. So it's possible that some animal following the bottom just gets confused and comes a little too close to the surface. It's possible that these horn-like appendages were breathing tubes, and the animal could barely break the surface and get its air. The sightings were also seen around the rivers, and there were 5 rivers leading into Loch Ness, and whether this was because they were feeding on salmon coming down through the rivers, or because this is where the villages were, where the most number of people were around to be able to see the thing, is again something that's unclear. Again, this is the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau. These are vans that had done surface observations around the loch. This was a group I was with in '72. This was our 2 independent pieces of evidence. We have a sonar chart and you can't read these, but these are independent sonar experts saying it looks like an appendage, a flipper perhaps. At the exact moment we see this, which looks like that flipper. I can tell you the original photo didn't look anything like this. It was corrected by a magazine, and this is what's out there now, but the original photo did not look anything like that. This is our rig. This is Charlie Wyckoff behind it. Bob Rhines is in the back. This is Bob. That was Nick. And this is me, about underwater. But here's our 4 cameras and the light array off to either side. And this is our high-tech device, which in 1973 was pretty high-tech. And it was a computer. Yeah, exactly. And this is Tim Dinsdale. Tim had written several books. Wonderful guy. He had taken a photo in '62 or a movie, and you know, the RAF said definitely a animate object. Maybe it was a boat off in the distance. I don't know how we got there. Okay, I won't tell you that about Tim. Okay, Tim, you know, if you want to make a living doing this, you got to sort of be a P.T. Barnum. So, for instance, Tim told, one day we ran into him in our boat, he was in his, and he told us about this extraordinary sighting he had in Neck, and he couldn't have been more enthusiastic, and look at all this gear, and he said, I was just too stunned to turn on the cameras. Yeah, okay. That sighting never turned up in any of Tim's books. Great guy. Anyway, and this was the Japanese expedition. That's Yoshio Ko, who led the thing, and you're looking at guys who were in wetsuits. That always amused me because I was in my 3/8 inch. No, they were dry suits. I'm sorry, and I was in my 3/8 inch wetsuit. And what do we got there? Oh, yeah, you can't really see it. In '75, the Academy had some success with what's called the gargoyle photo. You can look it up. You can't really see it there. And also, oh, there it is. Yeah, this is supposed to be the head. We got another shot, or they got another shot of a body. How do we go back? Okay, we lost the body shot. Okay, there's the body. And this is supposed to be a body. The camera, the array was sort of swinging. It's unclear exactly what they were looking at. It wasn't good science. But these guys were scientists. They believed in the scientific method, and they knew whatever they got had to be repeatable. And the next shot is Boleskine House, although whoever took that missed the crucial part of Boleskine House, which was this huge window that faced the north that Crawley built. It was actually a door with river sand on the other side so that he could practice his rite of Abramelin. Oh, I forgot to tell you about Frank Searle, but we don't know. That'll be the next time. But Frank was a guy who was also doing research there. And can anybody tell me why this is obviously faked?
I've seen that image before.
Okay, this is a hoax. Yeah, I visited, I took Dan Greenberg to visit Frank Searle, and I suggested he was hoaxing photos, and he pulled a knife on me and threw me against the tree, and it's all written about. He was a crazy guy. He was a guy who firebombed Adrian Shine. We're talking about, Jim's here. He knows Adrian. Quickly, anybody see anything in here that would say this is obviously fake? Something you will never see on any animal in nature is a right angle. And that thing has a right angle on it. Never had any movies, just still photos. And that was Frank Searle. And that's my talk. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lee.